And good morning, everybody. It is about 8:47 a.m. on this Wednesday, November 5th, 2025. It is 63 degrees outside, 63 degrees outside. It's kind of cloudy. It's going to be a little rainy today, but we'll see. It's one of those situations where you're basically told it's going to be about 60% rain, and then it's basically more along the lines of it'll come when it comes, scattered, whatever you want to call it. But with that said, before we get into the topic here, I would like to ask you guys to do me a solid favor. And before I ask you to do me a solid favor, I do apologize if I sound a little blah. I just woke up a little while ago. I'm still waking up and everything. I had to help, get things together so, my ride can get themselves to work and everything. So, yeah, and I also had to help out family from a financial perspective, but that's about it. But yeah, that's why I'm a little tired still because I woke up early and all that. But yeah, I just want to let you guys know about that before we start. If I sound a little blah or I go all over the place. But before we get into the topic, like I said, I'd like to ask you guys to do me a solid favor, and that's like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. Also, guys, you can click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube. You can find me at all your favorite audio, video, podcast affiliates, whichever one you listen to at home, at work, on the road to work, on the road, back home from work, on your lunch, on your break, whatever. You can find my podcast there, whether it's iTunes, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and to an extent Sirius XM. Wherever there's a podcast to be listened to and even watched at, you will find my podcast there. Also, ladies and gentlemen, you can find me at various other video outlets, video uploading sites like rumble.com, vemo.com, dailymotion.com, and odyssey.com. The first two, Rumble and Vemo, there's content identical to what you see here on the main YT channel, but some content that is not favorable or wouldn't be looked upon very favorably by YouTube, so you can see that kind of content over there. I'm also on deviantart.com at BVW1979 and at inkbunny.net at BWRosas. You can also follow me at twitch.tv and kick.com. I also have social media accounts at twitter.com, x.com if you will. You can follow me there. You can follow me at Blue Sky, and you can follow me at TikTok. So you can find me in those outlets as well. Also, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like, you can also support me through Patreon, Venmo, and Cash App. The Patreon, I do have plans for that. I'll let you know what those are very soon. I know I've been saying that. Still trying to. I've been saying that a lot. During these introductions, but I am working on plans, and when I get those ready, you will know. But like I say, you can support me over at Patreon, Venmo, and Cash App if you would like. That'd be greatly appreciated. Whatever you can do would really help me out. Also, guys, you can support me through my Fourth Wall and Teespring stores. I got some merchandise on both of them. The Fourth Wall stores have recently been open for about a month now, and basically I have 2 graphic tees on there. I think you'll like them. And there's 3 non-graphic items as well. Check those out if you would like. I might have to go back and edit those and put some graphics on them later down the line. But yeah, the link to the Fourth Wall store is at the top. And the OG Teespring store, which has been around for a while, link is at the bottom if you want to go and check those out. It would be greatly appreciated, especially during this holiday Christmas season, for me and for you guys to pick something up for yourself or for someone in your friend circle or your family, if you will. Also, during the video premiere here, guys, the live chat will be open. If you want to come in, say hi, chime in your thoughts and everything. Also, along with the live chat, SuperChats will be open if you want to help donate through that. It'd be greatly appreciated. And also during the video premiere and afterwards, comments will be open. And after the video premiere, if you're not here in time for the video premiere when it's happening, and you come in late, basically after it's all said and done, you can still donate if you would like through the Super Thanks option. That is the little heart with the $ in the middle. But with that said, let's get on to the topic at hand, shall we? Alright, so one of the videos that got recommended to me, excuse me, like I said, it's early, but one of the videos that got recommended to me this morning through YouTube was a collab. Now, I'm sure you've been noticing this with YouTube as of late, that one of the new additions they've added in with one of their updates is you can basically do a collab with somebody. Basically, what that means is essentially when the video comes up, when the video comes up, it's not just going to be under your YouTube channel, but it's also going to credit both your channel and the other channel. Now, the main channel, basically the main channel that does the collab, will have their name, front. I would say first they will have their name first, and then the collab name afterwards. So in this case, the video that was recommended to me was a collab 3 weeks ago by Team APS and TGS Anime. And I'm sure you all know who TGS Anime is when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'm sure some of you know who Team APS, if you know who Team APS is when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! It's kind of new to me. But like I said, outside of Team APS, you know primarily who his collab was or he worked with on this video. TGS Anime is when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh content. Him and Yu-Gi-Oh everything are like two of the primary ones here on YouTube that really talk about Yu-Gi-Oh related stuff more so than I think anyone. And obviously now you can add Team APS to that. Excuse me, to that list among others. But one of the main things they were talking about in this collab is when are we going to get the next Yu-Gi-Oh anime? Mainstream, mainline anime, if you will. Not just, like the Chronicles spin-offs that they did, which, by the way, another video that was recommended to me was through the Konami Yu-Gi-Oh YouTube page, which they put out last year to thank, the fans for supporting mainline Yu-Gi-Oh for 25 years. This being the 25th anniversary actually here in the States, here on the western side of things. This is actually the 25th year here on the western side. It was 25 years, over there in Japan and everything. But here, stateside, west side, United States, UK, you name it. It's been 25 years exactly. We wouldn't have known about the other anime until I think early to mid 2000s with the use of the internet, and again it really just popping off, if you will, and becoming what it has become today, or what it built itself to become today. We wouldn't have known about that until we started seeing information being thrown our way through various websites. But with that said, yeah, out there in Japan, and by extension the rest of the world, they put this thing out to not only announce Chronicles, which again is like a spin-off and everything for Yu-Gi-Oh, but also it was a way to thank the fans, the fan base for supporting the franchise for that long, a quarter of a century, believe it or not. But anyway, to get back to what I was saying, TAPS and TGS Anime, they did this collab talking about, the potential of a new Yu-Gi-Oh anime coming, because the last one that we had was Go Rush. Now I know that when I talked about in a reply, to Seven Item Stone, in their in their topic on basically, will we ever get a female lead, in the next Yu-Gi-Oh anime, if not the manga. Basically, I said there that I couldn't think of what the other names were of the shows. I mean, I know basically about the three. I guess you consider them the main three Yu-Gi-Oh shows. Mainstream wise, like your mainstream card wise, like the main, like the main OG Yu-Gi-Oh card wise that we know of, and then GX, and then 5Ds. I know about those. Don't get me wrong. But then afterwards, we had, I think, what was it, Zexal. Then we had Arc V, Arc 5, if you will. Then we had Brains. And then I think we had Rush. I think this is how it went. Rush. and then we had Go Rush. I think that's how it went. I'm not really sure. I have to go back and look, but basically, that's what it sounds like. That basically it went from 5Ds to Zexal to Reigns to to Arc V to Rush and then Go Rush. I think that's how it went. Correct me if I'm wrong in the live chat, if not in the comments. But mainly, again, the question was asked that I replied to is, would we get, a female lead? And I still believe we eventually will. I think the Shonen Jump is going to take that next step because I think the one thing he wasn't thinking about when he was, doing this video initially, that being 7 Item Stone, that TGS Anime and Team APS brought up in the collab 3 weeks ago. And this guy, 7 Item Stone, he did this video like about a week ago. Basically about a week ago, 2 weeks later. Obviously, he didn't see the collab video they did, but TGS brought up the fact that Go Rush, if you will, was the first time we had a female lead, but it was a brother-sister deal, and I think that's the one thing TGS is, not, talking about. I haven't watched the whole video yet. It's 50 minutes, so obviously you got to take a break on that. Like I'm sure a lot of people take a break with my long videos, audio on camera, but yeah, basically, he mentioned that we had a female lead there, but the catch was she was the sibling of the male lead, so we still had a male lead, in the series. But and I'm assuming this is maybe why 7 Item Stone didn't bring it up, when he was talking about, will we have a female lead and everything, because he probably knew that we already did, but it wasn't like a straightforward female lead, and that's what he was alluding to. That if we do get, if we do ever get another new Yu-Gi-Oh anime, whether it's announced at Shonen, at Jump Festa, which is a Shonen Jump convention event, if you will, or the next Tokyo Game event, or whatever the case might be, basically what he's talking about when it comes to getting a female lead, he's talking, like I said, being a standalone lead, not like, being a co-lead like what we had with Rush and Go Rush. He's asking the question, will we get a standalone lead and all that? So, and that's the one thing that TGS Anime, I think, made a mistake in doing the collab, and I say it with all due respect to the guy, because he's very knowledgeable on Yu-Gi-Oh! That when he said, yeah, we had a female lead, he didn't specifically state that it was that the female lead was a co-lead with a male lead. So, I think I think basically people probably corrected him on that, in the comments as well as later on, like, yeah, the female lead was not actually a straightforward lead. She was just a co-lead, a co-star, if you will, a co-main star. But anyway, to get back to what I was saying here, they were talking about, when are we going to get a new anime and everything, and whether or not it will be announced soon, and what's going on, because the last one, like I stated, was Go Rush. And, this is a good question a lot of people should be asking when it comes to any series that, from Japan or even here on the West. It's a good question to ask, going forward every year, because you want to know, well, wait a minute, you have all this merchandise, mostly in the case of Yu-Gi-Oh, excuse me, in the case of Yu-Gi-Oh, you have all this merchandise that you're selling, the cards, little dual decks, things associated with it. It's like you're selling all these items, but yet you have nothing to help promote it. You have nothing to help kind of get people excited to go out and buy these decks, or buy this this prop, if you will, that resembles what you see on the show. You have nothing out there. And this is why, and this again is a good question to ask. Where is the anime to help promote this stuff? You know, when are we going to get? Because one of the things they brought up is, well, we still have Rush stuff out there. We still have Go Rush and Rush items out there. So could the next anime be a third Rush series? You know, could that be it? And if it is, obviously, as they alluded to, that being Team APS and TGS Anime, what they would have to do is they'd have to age up the characters because, you know, the one thing they stated is that it feels like a lot of the characters over the past several animes for Yu-Gi-Oh have basically, I guess you could say, um, what regressed. That's the word I'm looking for. Regressed backwards, and instead of being like high schoolers or young adults and everything, you know, that instead they're regressing to middle schoolers, if not, you know, upper grade schoolers and everything that are on the verge of middle school and all that, that you're putting in the spotlight when at the end of the day, fans, longtime fans know that the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, the OG mainline anime that we got here in the States, you know, along with, you know, GX and even 5Ds, you know, they know that, you know, those animes set the standard of the main character and the friends, the compadres, if you will, you know, are all in high school or post high school. You know, they're either living on their own, doing their own thing, they're in college, stuff like that. You know, they're usually at an age which is relatable, and you could tell you could tell some very mature stories with it. They did state that Veins, I think that's the anime they stated. Veins was the last one of Reigns, whatever it is. They stated that that was the last one to kind of have, you know, a similar structure in storytelling where the characters weren't, you know, young, you know, or you know, basically it felt like it was a return to form, if you will. It was a return to form. Um, you know, when it came to the when it came to that anime and to that manga, it felt like it was a return to form, if you will. And basically after that, it just felt like it was going backwards. You know, some people might say, well, Arc V wasn't like that. Well, in a way, true. You know, Arc V wasn't like that because it felt like, you know, it still kept that standard formula. But people have stated, or at least the way they're making it sound, that being APS and TGS, that Arc V kind of was the start of the regression down to a younger age and trying to aim at more of a younger audience. And look, it's understandable if you're Konami, if you're Konami, not just in Japan but here in the U.S. It's understandable that from a business perspective, you have people going out and about secretly and noticing that most of the people buying up these Yu-Gi-Oh decks are young kids. So obviously seeing that, your thought from a business perspective is to make the next manga and the next anime of Yu-Gi-Oh aimed at a younger audience. That's the thing that goes through your mind initially, not realizing, not realizing that there are people, that are older than that, way older than that, if you will, like myself, and like, APS and TGS and Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything, there are people like ourselves that are still fans as well, that we still collect the cards. And I should know this because when I lived in Lawrence, Kansas, I worked at Burger King when I started to get into Yu-Gi-Oh! And I had a coworker that was into it, and I went over to his apartment, and we had a duel. We actually had a duel with each other, and basically the agreement was if he beat me, he'd take one of my cards. And what I had at that time, when I was getting into it, I had one card that he wanted that he didn't have, and he ended up getting it. Thankfully, I got it back on my deck later on, but that one card was Dust Tornado, the trap card, Dust Tornado. So obviously, for someone like me being in my 20s and him being in his 20s at that time, being into Yu-Gi-Oh! And basically being into, what the duels are, the stories are, and everything, this is the one thing that those at Konami USA and Konami Japan, they don't get. They just don't get or understand when it comes to properties like this. That basically, basically there are, adults, in their 20s. There are adults, you know, um, and there's a cat looking at me. It's a calico cat, kind of got like a calico color on the back. Kind of reminds me a little bit of a cat my grandma had, on my mom's side. But anyway, to get back to what I was saying, when it comes to these kind of properties, these companies don't understand that or don't get it. Just, I mean, they do, but not really. That the primary audience, the primary audience that they should be looking at and focusing on is not just like young kids and everything. Those, kids going into middle school and high school and maybe college, but they should be looking at they should be looking at the college kids as well, as well as the ones after college, because these are the people that, you know, basically, grew up with it or started to get into it at a certain age and have been fans since then. And that's the audience they should also be targeting, if not primarily. So when it comes to a new Yu-Gi-Oh anime, I get where, TGS and APS are coming from. That the next anime needs to be more, I wouldn't say grounded in reality, but more mature in tone. What I'm understanding from what they're saying, what I'm understanding from what they're saying is that we need an anime of Yu-Gi-Oh that has that old nostalgic feel of the OG mainline series that we know of from 2000, and a mixture of that with a mixture of what we got with 5Ds and veins. I think that's what they're looking at. They're looking at, we need something that's gonna, give us that kind of nostalgic old school feel, but with a modern day, aesthetic, added to it. So I get that. I understand that. And like I said earlier, and they even mentioned it, it also needs to have that feeling, nostalgic old school with a modern aesthetic, but that, that old school nostalgicness of, when a character on the show uses a card, and it's a card that basically you have not seen yet, but you've heard, but hey, if they're using it, it's going to be, on its way, into our hands down the line. You want something that's going to get you excited to want to eventually, when you get that card, try to, do your own version of that combination, or do your own summoning of that monster when the opportunity is right. So so I get what they're saying by that. What they're saying by that, and to me, I can feel and sense, because again, I haven't watched the whole thing yet. I can feel and sense though that they're looking at the idea of, we need something that has that old school nostalgic feeling in storytelling and character development, but with that modern aesthetic. Old school nostalgic feeling. As crazy as that sounds, when it comes to the OG mainline Yu-Gi-Oh from 2000 to 2005 and 5Ds. But basically, it's kind of true when you think about it. But basically, take a combination of those two shows, the mature level, storytelling level, character developing level, basically take a hybrid, a combination of those two things, and mix them in with the modern aesthetic that we got with Veins, and I think we'd be good to go. I think we'd be good to go. But here's the other thing, and I haven't gotten to this part yet, but it's in the thumbnail, I should say. Like I told you guys earlier, I'm still waking up. I'm still kind of tired. But it's in the thumbnail that they also mention reboot. And that's something that even Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything and 7 Item Stone and a few others have looked at and talked about. What if the next Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime is a reboot? In other words, what if we're going back, back to the beginning, but for a now more modern audience? What if that's the case? We're celebrating 25 years of mainline Yu-Gi-Oh! And also if you include the season 0 of Yu-Gi-Oh!, if you will, that was more based on the earlier stories of the manga, the first 5, with the first 2, 3, 4, 5 volumes of the manga, if you count that as well, you know, basically, that's the other thing that's been talked about. Like, could a reboot be on the horizon? Could a reboot going back to, the roots of the roots of the franchise, the manga and the anime, be around the corner? Could that be the next anime and manga? And I think, honestly, when I hear something like that, and again, everybody's been talking about it, like I mentioned, but when I hear something like that, my thought is, well, if you're going to do a reboot, of the OG mainline Yu-Gi-Oh, maybe even incorporate some of Season 0 in there, of the, original manga run. If you're going to do that, in my opinion, then you need to make sure that this time around, you don't hold anything back. Because a lot has changed. A lot has changed when it comes to not only, how we digest, an anime and everything itself. Not only has it changed in ways that we digest and watch the anime, but it's the same way with the manga, the same way with comic books and everything. Things are a lot more online, more stream-like and everything. And by being more stream-like, basically being part of streaming services and everything, you can obviously you can obviously get away with a lot more. You can. You can get away with, a lot more than you could on regular broadcast television. So if a reboot is on the horizon, if that's going to be the next, Yu-Gi-Oh anime and manga that basically, goes back to the beginning, bring back characters like Yugi, like Teiya/Enzu, Joey, I can't pronounce his Japanese name, if you will, Jodia, or Jotia, I can't pronounce it, I do apologize, but like Joey, Tristan, who was known as Honda, I know that one, and everything. But if they go back to that, bring those characters back, and even bring back that one female character that, was also originally part of the group back in, the manga and even the Season 0 anime. I can't think of her name either, but you bring her back, so that way, like Teiya has a companion. You do that, and then again you start to focus more on being a little bit more non-hold backish, if you will, in tone and storytelling. Then yeah, I would be all for a reboot. I think anybody would be for a reboot, especially if the reboot, becomes more faithful or is more faithful to the original manga and what the original source, the original manga and stuff was basically the original source material. I think people would be great. I think people would be fine with it. Honestly, I think they'd be happy with it. And like I said, basically, times have changed. Times have changed to how we digest and watch, our programming. Times have changed to how we digest and read the mangas, the comics, the novels, and all that. And, with these changes also comes the fact that things are a lot more lenient, a lot more freelance. In other words, basically, you're allowed to go as far as you want to go. You can have the characters say certain words, if you will, or describe certain situations in more detail. You don't have to worry about holding anything back. And to me, if a reboot is the next anime and manga for Yu-Gi-Oh, then they have to go that route. They have to they have to go, that route and allow for the Yu-Gi-Oh anime not only to be a little bit more faithful to the original manga source material, but basically be more risque, and I'm not talking NSFW risque, get your mind out of the gutter from there, but I'm talking more risque and showing, a lot more violent, a lot more, violent material. Because we know that in the original Japanese version of the mainline anime, and you can look online and do comparisons because there are sites that allow you to do that. When you look at the OG Japanese uncut version of the mainline anime, you could see that a lot of things were cut out, a lot of things were edited due to the tone and nature of the situation. You know, like, with Zork, his form, basically, we know he had like this little snake thing at the bottom of him, right? Well, in the edited version, they kind of moved that up to his chest, to where it basically, it's more appropriate, right? Even for Saturday morning standards. But in the OG anime, that snake thing or whatever it is, it's not up to the chest. It's in another region, if you know what I mean. It's basically hanging off him like you know what, or basically standing out like you know what. So yeah, basically, you look at that. You look at how other things were cut out, or cut out, edited out, and everything removed, entirely because of the tone and in nature of the scene. Because of the graphicness of it, like like instead of characters being put to the shadow realm, they were killed and everything, and there would be blood and stuff like that. To me, honestly, if we're gonna do a reboot, if we're gonna do a reboot going back to the beginning, if you will, then it has to basically, again, be a manga and an anime that doesn't hold much back. It doesn't basically, it doesn't show any fear, is what I'm trying to say. It doesn't show any fear of not letting loose, and everything. It's got to be more risque, if you will, in allowing that stuff to be seen. It's got to be that way. It's got to be more willing to let those things be seen, especially, again, like I said, nowadays, with the way our watching and our viewing habits and our reading habits are, how much they've changed in the quarter century since the original manga and animes and season 0 anime came out. So basically you gotta progress with the times, is what I'm saying. You gotta progress with the times, and hopefully they do that. Hopefully they go out of the way and they do that, so that if a reboot is the announcement, either at Jump Festa or whenever, if a reboot is the announcement, that's what they got to do. That's what they got to do. And like I said, they got a lot. And like I said, times have changed, so they got a lot more options. They don't have to, just rely on Cartoon Network anymore, or a syndicated network anymore, or Nickelodeon or whatever. They can go as far as they want. They can go as extreme as they want, if you will. To a point. I will say that, to a point. But they could basically go a lot further. And you got outlets like Netflix. You got outlets like HBO Max, as of right now, unless it gets combined with Netflix and Paramount, depending on what that situation is. But you got Netflix, you got HBO Max. You got Paramount Plus. You got Hulu, which is an extension of Disney. It's going to be incorporated into Disney Plus, if you will. You got that. You got Crunchyroll, which is already not only showing the edited version, but the uncut versions of all the Yu-Gi-Oh series. You got that, if you will. You have YouTube, if you want to go that route. You have Prime Video, if you want to go that route, because that's, been home to a lot of new stuff as well. You got Peacock and everything. You got a lot of options. You have a lot of options on the table. You got a lot of options on the table, if you will, to utilize when it comes to wanting to broadcast the next Yu-Gi-Oh anime. And that might be the other thing that's holding them back too. It's like, okay, they want to probably do it. They probably want to make the announcement, but what are they going to use to showcase the anime? It's like, what is going to be that next step? Like, they know, again, television obviously has changed. So the question is, what's the next step for them? Where do they go from here? Where do they go from here when it comes to showcasing, the anime and getting people's attention? That's the other thing that's holding them back. It's like, what is going to be the best option? What's going to allow them to be a little more freelance? Because we all know maybe that's what they want. They want to be more freelance. They probably want to do a lot more than being held back, and so that everybody across the globe can see the anime as it's meant to be seen, read the manga as it's meant to be read. So so to me, I think that's the other thing holding them back. But whatever decision they make, whatever provider they go with, as a distributor, then honestly, in my opinion, they have, especially if it's streaming, they have to be, they have to be more willing to go all out. They have to be more willing to, basically take risk and not be afraid to hold anything back. And if they want to go the cable route, then guess what? You could do late afternoons if you want. You could go to Cartoon Network and use the Adult Swim section, and there you go. You'd be good. Adult Swim would be great for you to do something like that there. Or if you want, you can, like I said, do the afternoon, but you can put like a warning before it, like, hey, due to the graphic nature, da da da. You could do that too. But to me, because there's a lot more options from a streaming perspective, you don't have to worry too much about that. You don't have to worry too much about that, and you could take as much risk as you want. You can go as far as you want to go to make sure that fans, get to see the story as it's meant to be seen, as it's meant to be told. I mean, one of the one of the things I do talk about here on this channel is Pop in her Hellaverse and the two series that she has on Prime. One of them that just arrived on Prime, Hell of a Boss, primarily before then was just a YouTube exclusive show. It was just a primary YouTube exclusive show, but because it was on YouTube, she had to edit out certain scenes, so she had to, basically blur out certain I wouldn't say scenes, but certain, like objects and stuff, that she had to cut back on a few things here and there. But now that it's on Prime Video, you're getting it the way it's supposed to be seen, or the way she meant for it to be seen. And she even stated that, herself, that was the primary reason she went to them, or she made a deal with them, so she could get basically, the show, seen as it's originally meant to be seen. Just like with Has Been Hotel. Has Been Hotel, she's thankful, got picked up by Prime Video, because if it would have been a YouTube thing, it would have been suffering the same thing Hell of a Boss was suffering, if you know what I mean. So she was glad that happened, and now the same is happening with Hell of a Boss. So people can get to see and hear the show as it's meant to be seen. And I bring that up because basically, like I said, the options, they would now have for Yu-Gi-Oh! Reboot, if you will, if that's the next anime, the options they now have compared to 25 years ago is vastly different. It's different to an extent to where they can go to a Prime Video, and Prime Video will be like, hey, no problem. We'll let you have the anime the way you want. The way you want, that it was meant, that you want it to be seen, or as it should have been seen originally 25 years ago or so. So I could see, honestly, that being an option they can go with. They can be an option they can go with if they want to try to have the show, try to have the anime, the show, be the way they want it to be, as it's intended. If you kind of understand what I'm saying. But yeah, that's if the reboot. But this is all if a reboot, if you will, is the next step. If that's the next anime. Because if it's not, and it's something else, it's something that continues the legacy, then okay, fine. But if you're going to do another continuation of Go Rush, then you need to age up the characters. You need to age them up, if you will, so that way it can be more relatable. You need to make the siblings, in high school. Maybe have it take place 5, 6 years later, and they're in the final year of high school or something like that. Have it be like that, and again, make it relatable. Make it relatable if you want. And if you do that, that'd be great. That'd be perfect. I think a lot of fans would be cool with it. But again, that's up to Konami. That's up to Konami of Japan, Konami of the USA, and the Konami Animation Studio. It's up to them to want to do that, because if they keep it the way it is now and not change much, then okay, it's understandable they want to target a younger audience because of that. But still, by doing so, you're alienating the audience that basically put the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise on the map for a quarter of a century. And you don't want to do that. You want to incorporate them as well. So I think the best solution is to age up the characters if you want to continue doing the Rush series, by, at least a few years. Now, if Rush isn't the next one, then what could it be? Well, like I said in my response to 7 Item Stone, I think the next logical option for an anime based on Yu-Gi-Oh! Is yes, get us a female lead. Let us finally have a female lead, straight up female lead, if you will, for the series. Let's, have Shonen Jump take what they're doing with Chronicles, that little spin-off series they're doing, and basically say, hey, people like it. They like some of these stories and everything, and, they like the female lead. Let's go with a female lead and do it. Try it out. And like I said, maybe switch things up to where perhaps, this Yu-Gi-Oh series with the female lead and her friends takes place at the beginning of, Duel Monsters. It takes place in ancient Egypt. Thus you could connect this new series with the female lead to the original series, where eventually around the 4th, 5th season, we basically see we see how the Duel Monsters was started there, with Atem, Yami, Yugi's spirit buddy, if you will. We see how things started there, and basically was progressed later on in the future. But like I said, if you were, like I said in the original video, if you did something like that, you had a female lead, you had friends, but it all takes place around that time frame, that could add to the lore, and it can basically connect. It could connect the entire Yu-Gi-Oh franchise in a full circle moment. By having some kind of an anime like that, occur with a female lead, with and of course have friends, but have it take place in that time frame of when the Duel Monsters thing started to become a big deal in ancient Egypt, or at least started to show its face in ancient Egypt, and even have it done around the time that Atem, Yugi, if you will, well, not Yugi, but Yami, Atem, was coming into his own as the pharaoh, if you will. So do that, in my opinion, and I think you could have a winning combination. And again, it brings things full circle. It brings things full circle. And also, if you really want to make sure people see it the way you want it to be seen, again, you have a lot of different options now to make sure that happens. But again, that's up to Konami and what they want to do. It's up to the Konami animation studios. It's up to the Konami of Japan, Konami of US. It's up to them. But if they go that route, and maybe Shonen Jump says, okay, let's try the female lead this time, and all that, then that would be, and again, they said it in that time frame. I think that would be great. So, it'd be awesome. Imagine. I'm trying to find the right word to say. Imagine the stories you could tell through that would have somewhat of a connection to the very first mainline Yu-Gi-Oh series, and especially the lore of how Duel Monsters came to be in ancient Egypt. Imagine how that could be, imagine how that could all be interpreted into one big storyline that brings things full circle, if you know what I mean. And here's what's interesting too: you could have basically the series, because sometimes these series, they go for about 2 seasons, if you will, 2 seasons, 3 seasons as of late. I think they go that far. I think, because the original mainline one went for about 4 or 5 seasons, and it stopped doing that around with 5Ds. I think 5Ds was the last one they went a long time with. Correct me if I'm wrong. But, to me, if you're going to go a short 2-3 season run with this, then, in my honest opinion, the best way to wrap it up is to have it wrapped up, and basically bring it full circle, if you will, to have that connection to the original mainline series. Have it wrap up to the point that the way you get the last episode to end, the final thing we see in the last episode, is basically some kind of a star thing shooting, like one of those little bright star things, like when Team Rocket goes, we're blasting off again, and in Pokemon, and all of a sudden when they blast off, they disappear in the sky, and you hear this, and you see like this little star going, bing, you know. Basically to me, the way you could close out that series, in my opinion, is basically, honestly, you could have the last shot we see. You could have the last shot you see, and I just saw two flies in here. I have to kill them in a little bit. But basically, you could have the last scene that we see. You can have the last scene that we see be of, let's say, our main female protagonist and her crew, looking up, into the sky, and they see this little thing, like this little brightness go ping, and then out of the sky comes Yugi and his friends. That's, again, as I was trying to say, you bring things full circle. You'll bring things full circle in that manner. So I think, honestly, that would be a great way to, bring, like I said, connect everything, from the start of the main line all the way to this new one, and then full circle moment, if you know what I mean. So to me, that would be great. That would be great to see. But like I said, it would be up to Konami. It would be up to, the animation studio, up to up to their headquarters in Japan, the U.S., if they wanted to do something like that. And again, if they do, they got a lot of options for ways of showcasing it to the public, if you know what I mean. Nowadays, more so than they did when it all started from a mainline perspective 25 years ago. But anyway, though, guys, do I think another anime is coming? I'm very positive it is. Whether it's a continuation of Rush, which I think if they do that, they got to age the characters up to maybe their senior years in high school, make it more relatable. Or if it's a reboot, in my opinion, basically bringing things back to status quo, then I think, honestly, you need to be more risque, more chance-taking, if you will, with adapting the manga stories into the anime, as well as also include some characters from the original anime and manga, like Season Zero's anime, into the mainline story, like that one girl and everything. So I think that would be great if they did that. And again, basically with the options to broadcast or showcase the series more plentiful than it was 25 years ago, I think, honestly, they could take an advantage of the opportunities and not, like I said, hold anything back. Now, if the next anime is not a reboot, but it's another Yu-Gi-Oh series, then I think, honestly, this one should be more like a prelude. It should act like a prelude. Give us our first, and thus at the same time, give us our first straightforward female lead in the series. Give us our first straightforward female lead in the series, but also have it take place in ancient Egypt around the time, of the rise of the Duel Monsters game and all that. And then, along with our female lead and her crew, tell the stories you can, tell the stories that you'll tell there, kind of connect certain situations and moments to the mainline series, mostly the last season of the mainline series, the OG mainline series, I should say. Do that, and then, like I said, have that last shot be of our main female protagonist and her friends looking up, and they see this little ping in the sky, and then out of that ping comes Yugi and his friends, Yugi, Taya, Joey, and Tristan. So, and in a way, you'd be basically bringing things full circle by doing so. But those are just my thoughts, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section if you haven't already in the live chat. Love to hear from each and every one of you on this. And like I said at the beginning, do me a favor and like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. Also, click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere and to support me elsewhere outside of YouTube. And again, guys, like I said at the beginning, I do apologize if I sound a little blah, if I was all over the place. Again, I just woke up a little while ago, so I do apologize for that. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys. Comment down below if you didn't do it already in the live chat. And super thanks will be open in just a bit. Give me your thoughts. And until next time, I am out.